Hello friends, how are you? My name is Arith Härger, and today I'm going to talk about Sami Neo-Shamanism in the Norwegian context of modern religious and spiritual reconstructions. This isn't the sort of video that I usually do because as an archaeologist I have the tendency to focus on the historical past, but we are always making history, and in our contemporary times there seems to be a spiritual awakening, and modern pagan and native faith groups and movements have sprung up across Europe. There is a rise on all sorts of pagan European traditions, and this is indeed an age of great changes in the Western mind. This video was a sort of request by one of my patrons, Aaron Smith. Thank you so much. The patron in question asked me to make a video about certain groups and organizations that create historical events based on archaeological evidences. All their clothing, tools, weapons, lifestyle in general, historical reconstruction groups that contribute with information on cultural heritage. But I thought it would be interesting to focus on pagan movements of other countries rather than focus on specific organizations, because in the past I have made a video about a specific organization and it did not end well, and I hate to work with dishonest people. So from now on, if any organization wants me to talk about them, we do it properly in legal terms with everything written down, because it seems nowadays honor means nothing to certain people and words are just words, unfortunately. So I've decided to focus on the specific case of Sami Neo-Shamanism in Norway, and the suggestions of my patron gave me some ideas to talk about other pagan movements across Europe on future videos. So, with no more delay, let's start this video. Before we delve into Sami Neo-Shamanism, we need a little bit of background context. Our Western societies, mainly European and Northern American, have lost much of the cultural heritage. But most importantly, we have lost a pagan way of thinking. With the introduction of Christianity and other such religions, much of our worldviews, perspectives, and our own approach to life itself has greatly changed. And that makes an outstanding difference. Nowadays, neo-pagan religious groups and organizations have the tendency to have a Christian approach to everything, seeking comparisons to facilitate the shift from a monotheistic past to a polytheistic religious life. Christianity and such religions with the same cultural basis are deeply rooted in our Western societies, and we share a collective consciousness that it's the absolute opposite of the pagan mind of the past. And this has great influences on the new pagan movements we are creating. When it comes to Neo-Shamanism, we are not in a true shamanic path. The shamanism of today in our Western culture is greatly based on Michael Härger's core shamanism. Michael Härger was the founder of the Foundation of Shamanic Studies. He pioneered the introduction of shamanism to contemporary life and is recognized as the world leader in this movement. Mr. Härger made an excellent job in reintroducing shamanism to the Western society, and his work is greatly appreciated. However, Mr. Härger introduced to us the so-called core shamanism. Core shamanism consists of the universal common features of shamanism. The principles of core shamanism are not bound to any specific cultural group or perspective. Our Western society has lost in great part its shamanic knowledge centuries ago due to religious oppression, so core shamanism is the closest we have to a shamanic understanding of the world, particularly intended to help Westerners to reacquire access to their rightful spiritual heritage. Mind that Michael Härger and other core shamanic teachers, did an excellent research work, and we are all grateful to them. But core shamanism got Western people into the habit of lying on the floor, listening to a recording of drumming, or in a best case scenario, listening to other people drumming for them. So core shamanism is a recreation of shamanic activities solely for Western people. In other words, we have adapted shamanism to our modern needs and daily lives within the Western society, when what we should have done was to reshape our minds and adapt our lives to shamanism itself, and not the other way around. I continue to reinforce Michael Härger did an outstanding job and gave us a great push. And now it's time for us to take the leap from core shamanism into shamanism and reshape our society once again. I believe that can be done. A slow process, of course, but not impossible. Native faith movements are frequently associated with the politics of nationalism. In spirituality, there shouldn't be a place for politics or for social regulations and a stipulated conduct on how to behave. And to this day, many modern pagan and native faith movements are deeply influenced by politics and social stigma, and that is a barrier that does not help us to free our minds and prevent us from shifting from core shamanism into a spiritual life completely detached from the realities of our Western societies. So to a certain extent, politics, religion, modern Western lifestyle has great influence on our modern pagan religious and spiritual movements. This isn't different in the Sami Neo-Shamanism, as seen in the particular case of Norway. But things are changing. Sami shamanism or traditional Sami spiritual practices are based on the shamanic past of the Sapmi region, northern Scandinavia, a region that covers an area extending from northern Scandinavia to northwestern Russia. It's a type of belief generally based on a type of animism and polytheism. However, what we have today in Norway is Sami Neo-Shamanism, an attempt to recreate and bring back ancient spiritual practices and customs of the Sami. So Sami Neo-Shamanism is a recent movement connected to nation building, and it belongs in the field of Sami revivalism, although very much shaped by New Age spirituality of core shamanism from the United States, adapted to the indigenous spiritualities of the Sapmi region. But let's take a look at what happened to Sami shamanism, historically speaking, why it changed and was forgotten, and then why and how it was brought back to life to a certain extent. As I have said, the Sapmi region covers a very extensive area involving at least 4 countries: Norway, Sweden, Finland and Russia. And as you might have guessed, with the different political approaches, this has a great impact on the lives of the Sami as a united native people. But I'm going to focus on the particular case of Norway because that's where the great majority of the Sami people live, and that's the country where Sami Neo-Shamanism was born. It's not clear when Christianity was introduced in this region, but we know from archaeological excavations that at least since the 13th century we have the Christian cross associated with Sami burials. The pre-Christian Sami religion and spirituality is often described as being animistic, shamanic and polytheistic in nature. So there was a great clash between the different religious beliefs when Christianity was finally introduced. During the 16th century, churches across the region started to be built, which was part of a program of colonization of this area. During the 17th century, with the churches already established there, a systematic and active mission of colonization and conversion was established. During this period, cultic drums were confiscated, holy places were desecrated, and as always, the typical demonization and persecution of Sami religious concepts and practices. The 17th century witch trials and executions didn't just happen in Salem, Massachusetts, but all across Europe and also here in the northernmost European regions, which we seldom hear of. Quite obviously, this resulted in an absolute crush on the native traditions and cultural heritage of the Sami. During the mid-19th century, a conservative Lutheran revival movement spread among Sami communities. To a certain extent, this movement actually protected Sami cultural traditions all the way to the time of the Second World War, when politically everything changed. Again, with the increasing oppression of Norwegian authorities in the process of completely turning this Sapmi region into a Norwegian territory in every field, in the name of nationalism. However, that Lutheran revival movement at the same time caused a devastating effect on the minds of the Sami people. It was very hostile to pre-Christian practices of the past and reshaped the mind of the Sami people, who started to see their past as something demonic of sorts. A stigma was created and a feeling of shame that made people abandon the old practices. The traditions that survived were greatly shaped by Christianity, and we really have to make a huge effort to see past the Christian influences in order to make a clear division between what's Christian and what are the pagan illusions. It took a long history before the Sami people could get back on their feet and regain some ground in their cultural heritage. With the changes of our times, the increasing environmental organizations and important steps in politics during 1989 with the establishment of a Sami parliament, these younger generations could now proceed to have a certain degree of freedom and seek their cultural heritage, their native faith. There was ground for a new consciousness rising from among a new generation of Sami. However, this new generation, much like most of us nowadays, grew up with little knowledge about their cultural and even language, not only due to centuries of religious and political pressure, but also their own living ancestors, parents and grandparents protected them from their own cultural past to avoid social stigma, because the past religious movements reshaped the minds of these people, of all of us actually, and people learned to consider shameful and even evil an identity that had become a social stigma. I'll be honest with you, where I'm from 20 years ago, no one would openly say they were pagan. So I can only imagine how hard it must have been for the Sami to openly return to their roots, since they are a minority in a region controlled by 4 different countries. With an increasing expansion of a new spiritual consciousness due to the changes of our contemporary societies, there was space for a new approach to explore cultural heritage and native faiths. The birth of Sami Neo-Shamanism took place in Norway. The founder of this new religious reality was Alo Gop. Now, I do recommend you to make a little research about him, and he has a very interesting book called The Shamanic Zone, which is a semi-autobiographical book where Alo Gop describes the spiritual development that turned to the Sami religious reality. But what happened to Alo Gop was much like what is happening to us in every other pagan background. His knowledge was purely theoretical, and the lack of a practical approach made things very hard. We nowadays have a lot of knowledge about the past, and thanks to archaeology, we are literally digging a lot of forgotten information. But as an archaeologist, I tell you that there are a lot of assumptions, ideas, possible interpretations, but a clear practical way on how to do things was completely lost. The very basic and most important aspects of paganism, which are the sacrifices, offerings, religious practices, have been lost in great part. And now we must recreate rituals to fit into our modern reality and try as best as we can to do it properly with the little knowledge we have. So, this is what happened to Sami Neo-Shamanism. It's a spiritual approach very much based on core shamanism, as I've previously described, but in an attempt to bring back the old traditions of the Sami people. By no means is this a process that came to a conclusion. Sami Neo-Shamanism, much like many other neo-pagan reconstructions, is a continuous process of combining various academic fields of the human sciences to gather as much information as we can to try to bring back something that was almost utterly lost. History, archaeology, anthropology, linguistics, and so on are essential and must be included in every neo-pagan religious reconstructions if we really want to make things right and to have a certain consistency in our pagan beliefs. It's not only about our spiritual beliefs, it's also about concrete factors to hold on to make our new pagan religious beliefs and traditions stronger movements of change. So, in Sami Neo-Shamanism, there is a huge basis on the core shamanism, on the adaptation of shamanism to our modern realities and the general shamanic activities of other cultures as supportive foundations, also greatly based on African drum traditions. What I mean with this is that core shamanism is universal rather than focusing on a specific native shamanic tradition. So Sami Neo-Shamanism is not strictly something native, but has other shamanic backgrounds that had to be brought in an attempt to save a native faith, but in this case clearly focused on the Sami shamanic motif and traditions. At this point, during this reconstruction of Sami shamanism, Sami Neo-Shamanism differed little from its core shamanism counterpart. Pre-Christian Sami religion had not yet been introduced until the early 2000s. However, this scenario finally changed. What Härger gave with his Sami Neo-Shamanism was an impulse, a push that led people to genuinely have an interest in the Sami. A new generation of professional Sami Neo-Shamans has been established, and ancient Sami gods and practices were added to Norwegian Neo-Shamanism. A variety of new options was available to the public, including a shamanic festival, and a new religious organization was established. The festival of Härger was initiated in 2010 as an annual event that receives financial support from the Sami parliament. It is a gathering of shamans from every corner of the world for a week-long festivity. So these past 10-15 years, there has been an increasing interest in preserving both Sami and Norse shamanic traditions. It's clear that what is happening in Sami Neo-Shamanism is practically the same that is happening to every other neo-pagan religious reconstruction. The ethnic identity factor is central to Sami Neo-Shamanism, as it is to other pagan reconstructions. But the truth is, these are very recent religious and spiritual movements, still in the process of picking up the pieces and constructing the bigger puzzle, and with loads of other cultural backgrounds that absolutely go against the ethnic identity factor. It's a slow process, but there is an increasing interest in the old ways, and that will help us to finally bring back a lot that was lost. Not everything, surely, but quite a lot, and it can be done. It's not impossible. However, it is a mistake to think that we, nowadays, on whatever pagan religious and spiritual path we might be, that we are actually practicing the old ways as they were, and we have finally come to an end, and the process of consolidation of the old traditions is done. Our approach to the old ways must be exactly the opposite. We must assume that we know nothing at all, so we might be more susceptible to receive new information. We are on a very important era with a lot more freedom than our parents and our grandparents had. So use that freedom well to obtain as much knowledge as you can, share it, and together we can bring back the old ways. Our ancestors, due to religious and political oppression and the circumstances of their times, gained traumas, as we did. I was still born and raised on a mixture between Christian and pagan background, but with Christianity with a lot more influence. But our parents and grandparents suffered traumas, and many individuals deny any connection with the old ways, whether due to continued feelings of shame and stigma or simply lack of interest. So now it's up to us on this new age of spiritual awakening to bring back the old ways. Sami Neo-Shamanism serves as a perfectly good example of the struggle of bringing back practically dead and practically forgotten old religious and traditions. In Sami Neo-Shamanism, Christian symbols have gradually weakened, and there is an increasing focus on the indigenous spirituality. All across Sapmi region, more and more native symbols are being used to promote the historical past. Schools offer courses in drum making, which is a big part of the Sami pre-Christian spirituality. Also, Sami art, music, film and popular culture have helped to spread and popularize the Sami culture not only to the Sami themselves, but also Norwegians and subsequently the rest of the world. All in all, Sami Neo-Shamanism differs from many of the trends that have been depicted in modern pagan backgrounds. It's a shame that many pagan reconstructions become a trend and are highly commercialized. Sami Neo-Shamanism hasn't reached that point yet, and I truly hope it doesn't. Something that becomes a trend often has the tendency to become part of the political agenda of governments. And too often, religion walks hand in hand with politics and bind people to yet another path that completely diverges from spiritual freedom. It's important to remember that Sami Neo-Shamanism is a new age movement that has the potential to unite nations. Historically speaking, Christianity carries with it colonial connotations and is a marker of boundaries. It creates a clear wall between Sami and other nations around it, especially Norwegian. While pre-Christian Sami past, in contrast, allows notions of independent origins and doesn't create boundaries in the historical past. Rather, it links Scandinavians to a broader sense of community, a past shared by Scandinavians which marks their ethnical identity. Alright, my dear friends, I hope you have enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and a very special thanks to my patron, Mr. Aaron Smith, for his suggestions, because it gave me some ideas for future videos, talking a bit about other neo-pagan religious groups spreading all across Europe. Once again, thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video, and as always, tack för idag.